Hi everybody, my name is Bailey Gibson and I'm so excited to welcome you back to Reading with Romans with the Gibson Navigators. I'm going to share my thoughts on Romans 9 today, and I'm really looking forward to letting y'all know what I got out of the passage and hopefully hearing what some of y'all think. So I'd like to start out with a little recap of what we have been talking about. So yesterday, Romans 8, we talked about how nothing can separate a true believer from God, how once you are a Christian, there is nothing that can remove that status from you. You are a Christian, you are a true believer, God will always consider you one of his children. And Romans 9 is really neat because it kind of is a bridge between Romans 8 and the next passage, which is Romans 10, and kind of goes through how the Jewish people can be saved. So Romans 9 is really neat because it talks about true believers. And it talks about a lot how you don't have to be, a descendant of Abraham physically to be a believer of God. Because when you believe in Christ, even if you're a Gentile, a Jew, whatever, you are a child of God and you are counted as part of his spiritual descendants. So it's pretty interesting, and it goes through how, we don't have a works-based faith and how that's something really important that a lot of people miss when they're learning how to become a Christian or learning about the Bible. So we're going to hop right into it. And one thing that I want to mention before we start off is that Romans 9 is full of questions. And I'm sure y'all have been in those instances in school when you ask your teacher a question and they just fire one back at you. They're like, well, why do you think that is? And you're like, I don't know, that's why I asked you. Well, Romans 9 is a lot of that because Paul got a lot of his teaching methods from the rabbis that he grew up with, and so they would ask questions to kind of guide someone to an answer. So you're going to find that throughout Romans 9 and really through a lot of Paul's works, there's a lot of questions because Paul wants to guide us to the right answer and not, explicitly tell us. He wants us to be able to learn and engage with the text. So that's a really neat part about Romans, and we're going to talk a little bit about that today. So the first thing I want to talk about today is the idea that Christianity is not a works-based faith and that if you truly believe, you will be saved. So Romans 9 really illustrates this really clearly, and there's a couple of things we'll go into later in different passages, but first I want to read a few verses from Romans 9. So the first one is Romans 9:8, that says, "In other words, it is not the children by physical descent who are God's children, but it is the children of the promise who are regarded as Abraham's offspring." In other words, you don't have to be a member of the nation of Israel to be a Christian. If you believe in God and you believe in the promise, then you will be a Christian and a descendant of God. So that's a really neat idea because, before this, the Jewish people, they were the Israelites. And if you weren't one of them, you didn't have their God, you didn't have their promises. Back in Abraham's time, back in Moses' time, it was just the Israelites. And so this really brings in the idea that God really wants to save all his people, and he loves all his people, not just the Israelites, because we are all his people. And you can also see this pretty clearly in Romans 9:30 when it says that the Gentiles who did not pursue righteousness have obtained it, a righteousness that is by faith. But the people of Israel who pursued the law as the way of righteousness have not obtained their goal. And he brings in one of those questions where it says, why not? Because they have pursued it not by faith, but as if it were by works. So Paul is really saying here that the Gentiles have obtained righteousness, have gotten God's grace because they believe in him and they are serving him. But the Jews are not, because they are trying to make it a works-based faith, and just following the laws they believe that will get them to heaven. So that's a really interesting idea. There's not very many religions that don't say, you got to do this, this, and this. It's something that's unique to Christianity. And you can see this throughout the New Testament. One of the verses I want to share with y'all is in Ephesians, and it's Ephesians 2:9, where it says, "It is by grace you have been saved. For it is by grace you have been saved through faith. And this is not from yourselves. It is the gift of God, not by works, so that no one can boast." So this is something that Paul mentioned earlier in Romans, where he said the Israelites were not saved through righteousness. And you can remember back, there were a lot of rules for the Jewish people before Jesus came around. The Pharisees enforced these rules, the sacrifices, all that sort of things. And that made them believe that they would go to heaven, and just that alone was fine. But here, God is saying, no, Christianity is not based on your deeds, but on your belief. And that's a really important idea because Christianity is not a works-based faith, and Ephesians really spells that out for us. Just doing deeds is not going to get you into heaven. And my sister told me a little anecdote one time that I think really reiterates this point. She said that, sitting in a garage doesn't make you a car, just like going to church does not make you a Christian. There's a lot more to being a Christian than just going to church on Sundays and being nice to people. It's about believing and about your spiritual relationship with God. And Romans 9 is a really good reminder of that. Now, on that point, if you flip to James, you're going to see something interesting and something that might seem a little bit contradictory, but in further detail is not. So James 1:22 says, "Do not merely listen to the word and deceive yourselves, do what it says." So this is interesting because here James is saying, don't just like listen to the Bible, live it out. And that kind of would make us think that we have to do works in order to be a Christian, but that's not what he's saying. He's saying that if you are a true Christian, you're going to want to do good things that are in the Bible. You're going to want to love people. You're going to want to care for them, not because you're trying to get into heaven, but because you're a Christian and you're living out your faith. And this is reiterated in James 2:14, where he says, "What gives it, my brothers and sisters? Someone claims to have faith, but has no deeds. Can such faith save them?" So James is really showing us that faith by itself, with nothing else, is dead, and that we need deeds to supplement our faith because that's how we live out our faith and that's how we act as true Christians. And that's a really important point in Romans 9 that I think a lot of us forget sometimes, that we are saved. We don't have to do works to be saved. We are saved through believing in God and Jesus. And if we do things that are in the Bible and live out our faith, that's just because we are Christian and we are living out our faith, not because we're trying to be saved. So I really like that point. I hope y'all do too. Another one of my key takeaways from Romans is in Romans 9:20, where it says, "But who are you, a human being, to talk back to God? Shall what is formed say to the one who formed it, 'Why did you make me like this?'" So another neat thing about Romans is that there are so many references to the Old Testament and other parts of the Bible that really help you to tie in all those prophecies and a lot of the verses from the Old Testament, which is really interesting because I think a lot of the time as Christians we tend to focus on the New Testament because, Jesus is one of the central parts of our religion, and so it's a really big deal to read about his life and his teachings and things, but we tend to kind of stray away from the Old Testament because it's kind of confusing and it can be really wordy. But Romans is really neat because it does tie in so much, and if you have a study Bible like I do, it'll give you all those little passages at the bottom so you can refer back to them. But what this verse refers back to is Isaiah 29:16, which says, "You turn things upside down as if the potter were thought to be like the clay. Shall what is formed say to the one who formed it, 'You did not make me'? Can the pot say to the potter, 'You know nothing'?" And I think this is a really good reminder that, through our daily lives, a lot of the time we're like, what the heck? Like, God, why is this happening to me? I don't understand. And we can get angry with God and blame him for things that, he didn't do. They're not his fault. And it's just really important to remember, and a great reminder from Romans 9, that God has a plan for us, and it's not going to help us to get mad and to talk back and complain, because he's got a plan and that's not going to change. And sometimes you've got to suffer a little bit before you get to God's great plan for you, and that teaches us a lot more about our faith and about who we are. And so I think it's one of the big parts of being a Christian as well. So that's a really interesting part of Romans 9 too, is that we got to trust God. We got to trust him through the ups and through the downs, and even when it gets hard, we need to remember that God loves us, and just need to remember that if we live out our faith through our works and through our love for others and for our fellow Christians, that everything's going to be okay, because God does have a plan for us, and we're not going to know what it is until the end. So Romans 9 is full of really big gems like that one. I think it's definitely worth reading through. It can be a little confusing, but I think all of the notations at the bottom really help you connect to different parts of the Old Testament, and it's really inspiring to me because it reminds us that, God is in control, because it definitely doesn't feel like I am sometimes, that God is always in control and he's never going to lead you astray. So I hope you guys can really see this and carry it out throughout your day-to-day and throughout the rest of your break and the rest of your life. Big order there, I know. But thank you all so much for listening and reading along in Romans 9 with me. It was really fun to read through, and I encourage you to do the same. And I wish you a very Merry Christmas, and I hope that you are staying safe and having a great winter break. Bye, guys.